Welcome to Don't Be Caged by Your Age, a podcast devoted to dissolving ageist beliefs and fears and providing pathways for you to repurpose, reimagine, and reinvent your decades of lived experiences. I'm your host, Ande Lyons, celebrating my 67th year of living, and I know you'll find the resources, ideas, and inspiration you need to thrive after 65. I'm so excited for you to meet our guest, Mary Bartnikowski. She's 67, an award-winning photographer and author who, at the age of 50, sold all her possessions in Silicon Valley, California, and began traveling around the world solo, which she has now done 3 times. You will love hearing her safe and affordable travel tips for folks over 60, and you'll be inspired by the unconventional ways she funds her travels and her life. Stay tuned for a delicious conversation. Welcome to Don't Be Caged by Your Age, Mary. I'm so happy you're here to share insights, stories, and advice with our listeners.
Oh, thank you. It's so wonderful to be here. This is such an exciting thing for me to talk about because I want to help people change their life, especially women over age 65.
Absolutely. And you personify what shattering age-related expectations looks like, Mary. You've been doing so many remarkable things. But before we get started to share your delicious stories, please share what is your age, where are you from, and where are you right now on the planet?
I am age 67. Sometimes I forget. I'm in Sicily right now. I grew up in upstate New York, and then I moved to California where I spent most of my adult life in the heart of Silicon Valley. And then I started traveling worldwide 17 years ago.
Oh my gosh. And listeners, Mary is an award-winning photographer, the author of 6 books. She's been living life with passion and purpose while, as she said, traveling the world for the last 17 years. Also leading writing, yoga, and photography retreats here in the US and in other countries. Mary, take us a little bit on that roadmap of the last 40 years of how you got started in photography and share about your books that you have published, how you decided to travel solo. You've got such fascinating stories to share with everyone.
I'm trying to put it in a nutshell. I like how you said the last 40 years. That's great.
Yeah, how do you recap that in like 5 minutes? Okay, here we go.
Well, it's a great question, though, because the last 40 years have been incredible. So 40 years ago, I moved to California with my then husband, and I wanted to start my photography business there. And it was just when Silicon Valley was coming like straight up, a very exciting time to be there. And raised my son there. The photography business was thriving. And
Mary, how did you get into photography? Because this would have been the 80s, right?
Yep, in 1981. So I always loved photography. I've been taking pictures since I was 7 years old, and my grandfather gave me my first camera.
Was it like a Nikon, or what did he give you?
Not even. It was this little plastic, it was called a Diana camera. And so I would like creep around and take stealth shots of my family, which they didn't love. And it was just so fun. And I just kept doing it and loved it. And I really didn't know I could make a business doing it until I tried. I tried wedding photography, 725 weddings later.
Oh my gosh. Well, that's a way to up your game in photography. But did you obviously move to single lens SLR cameras? And I know listeners, you remember the days when we had to develop our film, whether it was in our own dark room or we dropped it off somewhere to get developed. But
yes,
how did you learn how to do all those apertures? And I'm just asking this because when we learn a skill set like you did with photography, it informs us as we move forward, right? And because you had to learn all these different things, and that sets your brain up to learn more as you grow and glow in life.
Well, exactly. And it just keeps continuing on. I mean, you can't think of it like, oh, I'm too overwhelmed to learn this. I mean, I was just so excited about learning it that I never even thought about making money at it. It was more, Like I was in charge of the dark room at Stanford University because I loved it so much. It wasn't because I was even starting my business yet. So I did it as a hobby for 10 years. I mean, where I was actually like developing things and printing and taking pictures in our travels. And then I thought, well, let's try weddings. And I like to go to parties.
Of course you do. And then you're very good at stealth photography. So nobody knew you were really there taking their photo because you already had honed that skill.
That's right. Yeah. I can be invisible and I can teach people how to be invisible.
And if we can stroll down memory lane just a little bit, listeners, when Mary
Mhm.
was in Silicon Valley, that's the 80s. That's when you could get a ranch house for like 50,000
Oh,
versus 3 million today. It was
that's right.
before it took on all the characteristics of the startup industry and the billionaires, et cetera. So that must have been fascinating watching that part of the world evolve.
It was, and those people were my clients.
Yeah.
And, I lived next door to one of the founders of Google. And it wasn't like everybody was fabulously wealthy yet. I mean, some people were very quietly wealthy, but you'd meet geniuses every day. And it was very interesting to be in the culture of science and yet be an artist. The science mindset is very different than our art, but what I found is that those scientists, they need art, and that's why I got hired. And those people came to my exhibitions. I had 11 exhibitions. It was really fun. But what I realized was that science needs art, and I happened to be in the right position at the right time. No one else was doing what I was doing. No one was doing stealth photography for weddings. Now a lot of people are doing it, but nobody in the valley was doing it then.
Oh my gosh, you seized a phenomenal opportunity and you flowed with it. I love that. And I see that thread of you living the adventurous life, showing up at Stanford and saying, hey, I'll run your darkroom for you, or showing up, or let me take some photos at your wedding. You're curious and you're
Mhm.
comfortable putting yourself out there.
I wasn't always comfortable. What I learned from the weddings was that I had to take charge and make and help people feel comfortable. And so my natural inclination is to do that, but I didn't realize that you can do that in a business setting. And it wasn't comfortable at first, but as I did it more and more, I was like, oh, okay, I'm a risk taker. I can do this. And it just evolved out of my natural personality, but it really wasn't comfortable at first.
And that's a skill you can learn at any age, folks. So if you're feeling uncomfortable
Hmm.
after 65 about trying something new, it's okay. That's part of the process. That's part of the
Right.
learning. It doesn't
That's
matter. And I think sometimes, Mary, we can be hard on ourselves as we're aging, where we should be like, we should be braver or more courageous. But I think it's the opposite. I think the more that life slaps you around and hits you with some of the hard times, you get a little more shy about being risky because you know how
well,
hard it can be.
yes, life wallops are really challenging. However, I was just thinking this because every day here in Sicily, I go out and buy bread and croissants and I practice my Italian and I fall on my face every day. They don't mind. They just help me. They're very nice people in Sicily. I feel very fortunate I can be here because I feel like they welcomed me. I think they're probably the most friendly people in all of Italy, really.
Oh, that's so wonderful. Now, I mentioned that you're the author of 6 books.
Mm.
Share, how did that happen? What time in your life did that happen?
Okay, that is a good story. I started writing when I thought, I'm going to turn 40 soon, and I've always wanted to write. So I read this book by Julia Cameron, The Writer's Way. It's now like,
It's the artist's way.
yeah. So I
Love
read,
the artist's way. I still
yep,
practice the morning journals every day.
that was the thing. And so I said, okay, darn it, I'm going to sit down and write every day. And this is when I had like weddings every weekend, 3 to 4 weddings, raising my son. He's 37 now, but at the time, he was just in grade school. And I thought, I'm just going to go in my room, tell my husband at the time, you're going to answer the phone I'm not doing anything. And I committed to it.
Wow.
And I did that for 5 years.
Oh my gosh, that is a daily practice for sure. And was it nonfiction? Was it fiction?
It was nonfiction. I thought, okay, I'm just going to dump everything on the page. And then things started coming out, and I realized, you know what, I really want to do something with this. So I went to a writers' conference on Maui, and I got a book contract with a publishing company in Berkeley. And they even told me this is not how it happens. Bought the book. I mean, it wasn't even a book yet. I had to go home and make it be a book and hire somebody to help me because I was like handwriting, and I mean, it wasn't all organized. So it just goes to show that sometimes things happen when you're not even ready. You just have to take the risk. And all these wonderful people I met at this conference, none of them were professional writers. They had all come from other successful walks of life. You know, they were there because they loved writing. And it was really an interesting way to see how life can be different. Even though you've chosen another path, now you're switching.
Right. And I'm still bringing your art to the world. But I have to say, I love that comment. This isn't how it usually happens.
Yeah, they told me that a lot.
Mary, I love that that happened for you and that started you on another path. And listeners, I will have a link for the Artist's Way information in the show notes because no matter what you have going on in life, Julia Cameron's book, The Artist's Way, will help you tap into new areas of who you are and who you can be. It is one of the most extraordinary books and extraordinary practices. And listeners, you can find classes for this. You can find groups that are doing this, mastermind doing The Artist's Way. It is very powerful. So I highly recommend it. So Mary, then you have an extraordinary story about saying, I'm kind of done with this having possessions and responsibilities regarding land, housing, etc. Share with folks the next big stage you had in life.
Well, it started with getting divorced. It was very liberating, actually. I mean, it was awkward and uncomfortable, but it started me on a different path. We were married for 20 years. So I want to tell everybody out there that it's like you can be married for 1,000 years and you can still change your life. I had no idea it was going to happen. But what happened was 2 crashes in Silicon Valley. Like when I first got divorced, no problem. I had my own income.
And what year was that?
The first one was 5, I think.
Well, I think we had the dot-com crash. So in Silicon Valley, really felt that in 2001, 2002.
Yeah, so I was there for both of those. Yeah. Those kind of blur in the years, I remember. But I was there for both crashes. And so overnight, all my photography clients disappeared. I was like, what am I going to do? I mean, because photography is a luxury item. So what I want to stress is that something like a life wallop can happen to you. I didn't even know how I was going to pay my rent for my house. I was on my own then, but everything was fine. So I had like 4 jobs, teaching yoga, still doing photography, still writing. And then I was even delivering pizzas on the weekends because it got so bad.
Gosh.
What happened was I got myself out of it. 6 months later, everything was fine.
And Mary, can I just take a pause right here and remind folks, yes, life can get scary at any age financially. It can get insecure. It can be unstable. And you can go, oh my God, that's it. It is not it. You can take that beautiful brain of yours and repurpose it, reinvent it, reimagine it. And it doesn't have to include being broke or financially unstable, or what many, especially single women, fear is they're going to be on the street homeless.
Exactly. Yeah. And I actually was pretty frightened myself. And yet, because I took the steps to say, okay, listen, I'm going to turn this around. It only took 6 months. And then my son, he decided he was going on this huge trip to Asia for 9 months. He was only 18. And do volunteer projects. So he asked me to visit him in Nepal. And this was my first trip to Asia. I had no desire to go there, but I thought, well, he's there. Well, maybe I'll do a volunteer project. So I wrote this woman who'd been on Oprah. She has the biggest nonprofit in Nepal. It's still going strong. She's in her 90s. I went to her 90th birthday party a couple years back. So I wrote her, I said, hey, I can teach photography to your staff, do pictures, whatever. My son's there. I might as well do something. She's like, great, come on down. So this was one email. I came and I taught their faculty for a week. I had so much fun. And then both my son and I let him lead me all through Nepal. And then we went to India together. And then we went our separate ways. I went to Bali and he did some more traveling on his own, but we traveled together for a month and it changed my life because I saw when I came back to Silicon Valley from that trip that I could have a different life than what I thought I had.
Which had been what? Talk about what life had looked like until this aha moment. What were your
Okay,
goals before you went to Nepal and traveled?
Well, so after the dot-com crash, when I turned my life around, I was like, okay, my life is back, getting the income, photography, doing these exhibitions and having a good life. But I started to ask myself, I remember sitting on my couch one day, all my work was done, house looked okay, had even made my bed. And my son was in Morocco riding camels and meeting holy men in caves. And I'm like, I want to have an adventurous life too.
What's wrong with this picture?
Yeah. And I thought, and it should be easier for me because I'm older than him. That's what I literally thought. I never thought, oh, I can't do that. The amount of people that tell me, oh, I traveled when I was younger, but I'm not traveling. It's like, well, it's even better when you're older because you know more. And usually you're a little bit smarter about money. I used to take lavish, luxurious trips. I don't take those kind of trips anymore.
Right. Before you left Silicon Valley, though, you were more focused on how do I reinvent myself in Silicon Valley, in Northern California, versus you came back and you're like, I'm hitting the road. What happened?
Well, I came back and all of a sudden, all the big houses and all of the wealth didn't seem very interesting. I'd look at these huge houses and go, yeah, but nobody's in them. I don't understand why people are why am I doing this? Like, I had such a great connection with my own self that I thought, okay, I want to do this some more. I want to keep volunteering. I want to keep going on the road. I want to keep exploring. And my son showed me how to do it so that it actually doesn't even have to cost that much.
Right.
Which I didn't know was possible. You know, in the early 2000s, I was spending $500 and $600 a day on staying in pretty fancy places. And I thought that was how you do it.
So, of course, that's a roadblock to traveling because you think it has to be that way. And listeners, had you ever thought that you could go and do a fun volunteer gig that meant something to you, that actually made traveling more affordable? And also it added an experience and an adventure, right, Mary? It's one thing to go stay at a hotel and do the usual sightseeing things. But when you're able to go and join other folks from around the world who are volunteering for whatever reason, you're having an experience that becomes a memory that really can feed your heart and soul versus where am I going to get my next meal and what restaurant will I be doing that at? And where is that museum anyway?
Right. That's exactly it, which is not as exciting as meeting real people that live in the place where you are, learning a different language, learning a different culture. I remember this little baby in Nepal looked at me like she'd never seen a white person. And she tentatively came up to me and poked her finger on me like she wondered if I was real.
Oh
and
my gosh.
Like, wow.
And, for full accessibility purposes, Mary is white with silver blonde hair.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I'm the same thing. We both have short silver blonde hair. I love that little baby. You were raising her consciousness by showing her other skin tone and hair color in the world. I love that. But what about the fears of traveling solo? And tell everybody how you packed everything up and sold your possessions. Everything. Yeah. What was that like?
Well, I was in India and I had been renting out my apartment and there were some problems that happened. All of a sudden it hit me. I'm sitting there in Dharamsala, India, down the street from the Dalai Lama's house because I was there to photograph him and I had lived there for a month. And it just hit me. I'm going to go back and sell everything. This is crazy. I don't even want to live in the United States anymore. So it became this huge journey. I went back to California. Everybody was shocked I was selling everything. I have a few things in storage, but it was scarier to think about than to do it. So now when I hear people go, oh, I got to downsize, it's like, I already did that. And it's a very good process, even if you don't decide to leave the country, just to get rid of stuff. I mean, I had to get rid of stuff that I really loved. I don't have any furniture. That's fine.
Let it go, folks. Let it go if that resonates for you. It's okay to not have that furniture. And I think we do get indoctrinated, Mary, to
Mhm,
hold on to things because
mhm.
it keeps us attached to the past, or it's been handed down in the family for years. But sometimes, what does that
Right.
really mean? Can you take a photo of it? You being the photographer, take a photo of it, and now you have the memory of owning that and what the joy it brought to you in your life at that point in time.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I had to face that because I had to touch every single thing that I owned and hold it in my hands and say, okay, what am I going to do about this? So I ended up selling things. I gave things away. And as things left my apartment, it was very interesting. The people I met were wonderful. They came over and they loved what I was doing. We had great conversations and they were really excited for me. So there was a beautiful thing that happened with every single thing that left, even though it was sometimes emotional to let go of things. In the end, it didn't matter. And I'm glad that I did it because it freed me to be able to think in a different way about my life.
I think that's also important as we continue to thrive after 65, really understanding what does that look like
Mhm.
materialistically.
Right.
And so listeners, you're going to have different goals and what resonates with you. And that could change in 5 years. When you turn 75, you're like, no, that doesn't matter anymore to me. I did that over the last 10 years. And so, Mary, let's talk a
Mhm.
little bit about traveling solo as a woman,
Okay.
because we hear wonderful stories like yours, but we also hear scary stories. And I don't know how I would feel about traveling alone.
Well, it's really exciting. I mean, at first you do feel scared, I myself included, and you think, "Oh my gosh, the first time you land in a foreign country and there's nobody there to help you." Now I'm used to it. I know what to expect. But the thing is, going into it, if you feel like there's this feeling in your heart where you really want to try it, there's so much you can do to stay safe. And remind yourself, you can have horrible things happen in your hometown. I think it helped that I did Asia first, Asia and South America, before I really started to explore Europe, because Europe is a very easy country to travel in, and it's much easier than the United States.
Yes.
So I would say to people, if you want to start traveling solo, go off season to Europe. Travel by yourself. Everything's connected. Train, with the airport, with the taxis, with the ferries, with the trams. Everything is set up so that it's much easier than the United States. And it just makes you feel like, wow, I can do this. You have to do a few things like, okay, you don't want to travel at night. All right, then you just have to get up earlier and you have to have your schedule so that you arrive at your location so that it's not dark, because that's no fun looking for an address in the dark.
No, that's
There's
a great piece of advice. And what about if you're maybe more of an introvert and meeting people isn't always so easy, but you're feeling a
Mhm.
little lonely? How do you, once you get to where you're going, if you're not part of a volunteer gig or part of a walking tour or something like that, how do you recommend folks meet others so that they can build some connections and friendships and have human experiences on the road while they're traveling solo?
Well, that's a really good question. What I've done personally is go to meetups. Like, I have a friend who I meet every single year in Italy because we met at a meetup in Florence. And there were so many interesting people there.
Now, are
And
we
then I
talking, when you say meetup, are you talking the actual meetup.com?
meetup.com, so it's
Oh my
worldwide.
gosh. Yeah, I use it
Yeah.
here in the States, but I'd never thought
Yeah.
about using it
Yeah. So
worldwide.
there will be some permutation that maybe isn't called meetup,
Yes.
but it'll be connected to the meetup link, but they have meetup experiences in pretty much every big city.
Well, and what happens, listeners, is that you're going to meet people at this quote more
Mhm.
formalized event invite meetup experience who are going to say, hey, while you're here, you're going to want to go and
Yes.
do this or do that, or you can ask those questions. And listeners, I will have the meetup link in the show notes for you, okay? Because it's a phenomenal way to meet people.
And Facebook groups.
No kidding. About
Yeah,
like what
so
kind of Facebook groups?
well, like for expats in Italy, expats in Mexico. So those places are good because people are either living in those locations who are from your country, or there's people that are from the country you're going to that are actually in those groups and they want to meet. Like the one I went to in Rome, it was a Facebook group, expats in Italy. And I went and it was huge. And it was surprising how many Italians were there who wanted to meet people from other countries, and a lot of people from other countries go to Rome. So that was interesting. So they pitched it as like, oh, you can
Yeah.
practice your Italian and have a
Mary,
drink.
that's wonderful. And listeners, Mary has traveled the world solo 3 times. So she is really experienced. And I want to direct you to her YouTube channel because then you get to see Mary in action. Even most recently, she got a haircut from an Italian hairstylist. I mean, she really shares the depth of her experiences on the road, right, Mary?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I've had disasters with my hair specifically, like getting it done in Nepal didn't work. No, that was Laos, but that's in one of my books. It's a funny story, but you're going to be fine in Europe. But the thing about going around the world, it wasn't even this goal I had. Like one of my first trips, I was like, I'm just going to leave and I'm going to be gone for 10 months. I'm going to rent out my apartment in Silicon Valley. And I actually don't know where I'm going to go. I'm going to land in Thailand. And then from there, I'm just going to decide what to do. And then I ended up going all the way around.
Wow.
And so that's what's happened every single
And,
time.
and you have books about it.
Oh, yeah.
See, that's great. We're going to have all the links in the show notes, folks, because it's so much fun to hear stories. And now that you know Mary, you're going to hear her talking to you in the books, which is so much fun. And I also want to do a shout out to the fact
Mm.
that on Quora,
Quora.
Quora,
Yeah.
Mary has
Yeah.
over 3.5 million views of her writing. How did that
Mhm.
happen? How did you even know to go on Quora?
You know, it was suggested by a friend and colleague of mine who actually helped create Quora. So Quora.com was the first writing platform.
You knew one of the founders of Quora? Oh,
Yeah.
Mary, that
In
is
fact,
so
we're
cool.
still friends. We just got together right before I left, and he's got all these patents. We met at a networking event, and we stayed in touch. And he's a really interesting person. And so he suggested it, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'll try it. And anybody can do it. The cool thing about Quora is that anybody here listening can go right on Quora, start an account, and answer questions. And now people ask me so many questions, I don't even have time to answer all the questions I would like to, but you can pick which questions you want to answer. And it's really fun, especially if you want to be a writer, to like practice connecting with people, pick things that you're passionate about and write. There's no one editing it. It's very independent.
That is such a terrific tip. Thank you so much. And listeners, I'll have the link there for you and get on Quora. So, Mary,
Yeah.
as you've been exploring these years, which you and I'm 67 too, we were indoctrinated. We saw parents or friends of our parents who
Mm.
would work 35 years at the same gig and then retire. Retirement had just this whole different feel to it. It sounded like
Hmm.
you're going to move to Florida or Arizona and just play golf and have cocktails, which is fine for a few months. But listeners, humans are not meant to do nothing. We are meant to
Right.
be engaged. So, as you
That's
were
right.
looking at this period of time, how were you reframing it? And what conversations were you having with others your age? Because you are a stark contrast. You are shattering age related expectations with your vibrant life.
Well, I'll retire when I die. That's
There
the
we go.
truth. I
Stitch
just,
that on a pillow, everybody.
the word doesn't really apply to me. And I think as I get older, it's starting to not apply to a lot of people. Sometimes what you have to do is look at, okay, I'm going to be working longer. I mean, I love what I do. So it isn't like, oh, I wish I didn't have to do this. which is important about picking something you like to do. Or maybe even if you feel like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to still be working. I want to keep working because I enjoy it. A lot of people are still working and it's not going to look like how maybe you thought it was going to be in your past like 20, 30 years. But see, I don't feel like I'm old enough to be golden. Like maybe I can let up a little in my 90s.
Right. But let's talk about that word work, right?
Okay.
Because a lot of people, they've had some pretty lousy jobs.
Yeah.
And so, what does work look like for you today? And how does that fund what you're doing and your ability to travel? Because I'm thinking it's a combination of some paid gigs plus
Mm-hmm.
your ability to travel on a dime, so to speak.
So here's what's happened. I have been leading photography retreats and then, of course, the writing and yoga, and that's helped. And then I also do mentoring. I do book mentoring. I do travel consultations, so I can do those online. And then I do go back to Silicon Valley and see family and friends and colleagues once or twice a year. And I do family portraits. I'm starting to shift into some different areas, which I'm excited about.
Like what?
And
You've been doing all this
yeah,
art for years. What's next?
well, I've started to do copywriting and help
No
people with
kidding.
that. And then I'm also learning SEO with my own blogs. And there's a lot to learn with it, but you can really learn it. Like I always thought, oh, that's just too scientific, but actually it's not. And so once you learn it, then you can help other people with their blogs and their business writing, which I have done. I've done paid writing. And then I love the speaking. I really love the speaking and I love the teaching a lot. And so I'm placing more emphasis on that. And I love helping people one on one. So the consultations, like later this week, I have a writing mentoring session with a person that talks with me every week. And it's nice because you can do it from all over the world. So I'm more interested in doing things now that I can do worldwide
Yeah.
because that's just so much freedom. And then as far as the costs go, when I first started and I learned how to do it on a dime, I'm more comfortable now. So I've got a different approach. I almost always rent apartments. And like this one, I'm staying in for a month. So when
And,
I find a place that I like to be there for a whole month.
and how much does something like that cost, Mary? So you're in Sicily. So what is that in US dollars?
Not that much, 900 euros. So I'd say it was like a little bit under $1,000 for
For
the
the
month.
whole month?
For the whole month. So now this is because we had a relationship and I made
Mhm.
a suggestion. I have done that with other people too. So here's a tip, everybody out there. Once you go somewhere, don't just do it before you see the apartment and know, like all the people I've met in Sicily that own apartments have been lovely. I meet them. It's not like go get this key in this apartment somewhere you don't meet anybody like Airbnb. I have done that and I don't love it for a
Yeah.
lot of reasons. I just did a video on it. But when you meet the person, and this is the person you're going to be giving the money to, and you live in the place and you like it, why not come back next year for a month? So, what you can do is you can offer to pay cash. You can offer a lower price if it's for a month. This is what I've done in several different countries. They can say yes or no, but there has to be that trust between you. I keep this place nice. That includes a weekly cleaning. I love staying here. This is my favorite place in the world to stay. It
Well, and
honestly
and folks, if you're on YouTube, you'll see the beautiful colors. If not, hop onto my channel on YouTube. There's a link here for it, and you'll see the gorgeous colors in Mary's wonderful apartment. Mary, what is the name of your blog? Because I know this is where you also help people with all your incredible tips from traveling, writing, and now SEO, mentoring. What's the name of your blog? And we'll have a link in the show notes for it.
Oh, great. Yeah, it's called Vagabond Travel Mag, all one word. So Vagabond, Vagabond, travelmag.com. And I just,
Excellent.
yeah, and I just did a new post on a 2-week Italy itinerary. So if you've never been to Italy, go there and read that because it gives you the advice on where to go, what to do, what cities. especially first timers feel very overwhelmed. And I've been 7 times. And I love it. You can't even do it in 7 times. I mean, Italy is such an amazing
Oh,
country.
that's so wonderful. So, Mary, let's talk a little bit about ageism because
Okay.
we have internalized ageism, listeners, which is what we've taken on that prevent us and keep us caged by our age. But there's also
Right.
institutional and societal. And
Mhm.
it's really the last socially accepted prejudice,
That's a
ageism.
good way to put
Yeah.
it.
And have you run into ageism as you travel and how did you handle it? Let's talk a little bit about it.
Okay. I'm glad you brought this up because here's what I see. When I started at age 50 to travel, so I'm 67 now, I looked a lot younger. So I was getting hit on a lot. Guess what? I like it better now. I don't cause as much of a stir. I mean, I feel more comfortable talking to people and being friendly because of my age. Now, I haven't experienced the kind of ageism that you do when you work for a corporation
Sure.
because I've had my own business for 39 years and that was a specific choice that I made. Like, I didn't want to deal with all that stuff. But I do find sometimes, even in Silicon Valley, when I go back, I'll be at an Apple store and people will start talking louder and acting like I don't know anything about Apple products. And
Boy, there's so much ageism in tech. It's ridiculous.
it's ridiculous. And so finally, I think I was on the phone. I can't remember. I said to this youngster, I said, I've been in business since before you were born.
Before
Steve Jobs moved down the street from me. So I just feel like you have to stand up for yourself. Sometimes it's subtle, other times not so subtle. There are some benefits, but I think ageism is shifting. I really do. I've experienced it, but it's just lack of awareness. I have friends of all ages. I just met this lovely girl who was 28 in Syracuse. We had a couple of drinks together. We met again.
oh, intergenerational relationships are the best.
Yeah,
And certainly with my background in the startup ecosystem, I would always say, wow, my biggest fans are under 30. How did that
exactly.
happen?
See? Yeah. So, see, this has happened to me too. So, it gives you a different perspective, right? It makes you feel like, okay, I'm in touch with the younger generation. One of the things I've learned that's the biggest thing I've learned is walk away sooner.
Thank you very much. Boundaries up, everybody. As we wrap up, Mary, what advice do you
Hmm.
have for folks to help them from being caged by their age, by saying, I'm too old for that? Or I can't do that. I'm taking all this meds and I can't possibly leave home. And even if the person's been a homebody, right, a nester,
Hmm.
so to speak, but they do want to challenge themselves with some travel, what advice do you have for them to take that first tiny step?
I say you always have to do things that scare you a little bit because then you're learning something. It might be a new language. Don't tell yourself you're too old to do anything because you can always reinvent yourself at any age. I've done it over and over. People I know have done it. And I think the minute you stop growing and trying new things and taking risks is when you start to die. And I feel that if you wanted to travel, take an overnight trip somewhere, go somewhere close to home. You don't have to go to another country. But if you need help with changing your mind, changing your life, changing your country, I'm happy to help you. But don't give up. Like every time you think you're going to give up, just stand up, dust yourself off, and keep going. And you don't have to know the answer. Just stand up.
Oh my gosh, that's wonderful advice. I got the clappers out, listeners. Yay for that, Mary. That's so good. Listeners, be sure to follow Mary everywhere she glows. I'll have the links for on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. Check out her books on Amazon. Follow her blog. Find her on Quora. I mean, we've gotten so many great tips from you today, Mary. I am so grateful that you joined me for this delicious conversation on Don't Be Caged by Your Age. What a treat to spend time with you and learn from you.
Oh, I'm going to take a picture because I had so much fun. And I want to tell everybody about your channel because and your podcast because I think what you're doing is incredible.
Oh, thank you so much. And listeners, remember, you still have so much to give. The world needs you. Don't let those internalized ageist beliefs prevent you from pursuing new dreams and opportunities, no matter what age you're at, 65, 75, 85. The world is waiting for you. We want you. We need you. And we see you. Keep bringing it. I can't wait to hear your stories. Be sure to hop on over to the LinkedIn page for Don't Be Caged by Your Age, or on Instagram, because I want to know how you're thriving and what your challenges are, because we're here to help. This is a group of folks where we're not defined by our age, we're refined by our age. So please let me know how you're doing and how we can help you, and share your stories as well. So until next time, I'm wishing you a delicious day everywhere you glow. Cheers from Boston, everyone. Mwah. Listeners, I'm so grateful you carved out time to tune in and grab the gems from this delicious conversation. Be sure to hop on over to Don't Be Caged by Your Age on LinkedIn or Instagram to share your thoughts about ageism and unretirement. Because in this space, your age doesn't define you, it refines you. If you are inspired by a story you hear, it would mean the world to me if you would subscribe, share, rate, and review the podcast. To receive an alert whenever a new show is posted, please join the Don't Be Caged by Your Age newsletter. Every month, you'll receive links to the podcast and helpful resources for creating possibilities for your unretirement days. Thank you for tuning in. I am so excited to hear how you found ways to thrive after 65. Waving from Boston, cheers.